I grew up in this household. It was an academic household. My father chaired the physics department at Oregon State University for several decades. And as an only child, I had no choice except to hang out with adults and hang out with scientists and hang out with people that were endlessly curious about technology, about science, and about the future. My father's specialty was nuclear physics, so I was probably the only kid on the fifth grade playground that could argue the merits of nuclear disarmament, that could talk about what happened in Los Alamos, that could talk about what happened when you push plutonium and uranium together. And it sort of built a foundation that much later in life, after a few stops in my tech career, I found these two guys named Larry and Sergey. And Larry and Sergey started Google. And what we really quickly aligned on when we met each other was we're kind of a version of the same kid in many ways. They were a lot smarter than I was, but we grew up in the same household, the same dinner table, around very similar communities. They're also kids of academics, and they're also very curious and very scientific. So those roads, those roots, those influences kind of brought me to Google. That was 25 years ago. So we're celebrating 50 tonight for the Leonard Davis School. I'm about halfway there in my own career.
So, as the head of Google Ventures, you can invest in any company that looks exciting. And yet, I happen to know some of the investments you made over the last few years are directly in the field that we're in. We talked about Pronovo and some other companies. What made you recognize this as an important area to invest in, to throw money on?
I don't like to often be the investor that's chasing trends and chasing things that are uniformly considered as fashionable or popular. And one of the things that's alluring to me about this general field is that it's unseen and it's neglected by many. And that agitates me and frustrates me. Larry and Sergey also taught me that it's very important to spot opportunities, problems and opportunities that exist at a certain baseline today, but with a little bit of focus and a little bit of effort, you can greatly improve something from where it sits today. Larry and Sergey did that with a search engine. We did that with email. We did that with a host of other technologies. And I feel like the general field of aging, age tech, and the many, many other things that plug into this, they exist today, but I think we would all say if we were asked objectively, there's a lot of room for improvement. And this fuels a lot of my excitement and investment thesis in this area.
What would be the companies you'd like to see somebody start that you'll be willing to invest in?
Well, you mentioned one in passing that isn't in my portfolio. It's a company called Pronovo. Maybe some of you have heard of Pronovo. This is a company that has a very simple value proposition. If you're curious to understand a little bit more than what truths and data your blood can tell you, you can book an appointment at a private clinic and you can sit underneath a hospital-grade MRI machine and have a high-fidelity image taken of your entire body. And if you combine the information you learn from your blood with what an image of your body says, you may have a discovery. You may have an incidental discovery to tell you that there's something that needs attention and requires some follow-up. That type of company sits under a broader area that really drives me, which is how do we shift healthcare from reactive, what's the symptom, how severe is the symptom, who's going to treat it and who's going to pay for it, to let's go look for the symptoms, let's do the screening, let's push a little bit more in curiosity, because the earlier we detect these things, the faster we can respond and we can make a big difference if we do that. So that general field of thinking about proactive healthcare is deeply meaningful to me, and we've made a number of investments in that space. Pronovo is one. The Grail blood test, some of you may have heard of, which checks for about 50 different cancers, early stage, and data just from a vial of blood can tell you regionally where you may have a tumor and require some follow-up, et cetera, et cetera.
You have this fortune to be able to go two steps back and really identify those companies that nobody's heard of and chart their path forward. What are the things that help you decide who is going to be a winner?
So a lot of this comes from where are my partners curious? And what do we know how to do? I have an amazing partner who started with us half-time. He spent 50% of his life at the Broad Institute in Cambridge and half of his time investing with us at Google Ventures. He's a cardiologist by training. he spent a lot of time looking around the field of cardiology, what can we do to make heart health better? Simple, important question. Along comes this rising phoenix in contemporary medicine called gene editing. Super, super interesting, important technology. If you don't know about it, if you haven't read about it, it's worth understanding. And when you put gene editing and heart disease together, things get really, really interesting. So we decided to back our own partner and bring in a couple more founders and incubate a company inside of our fund. It's called Verve Therapeutics. And we built a drug to deliver a gene editor straight into your body to find the gene in your body that creates LDL cholesterol, the bad cholesterol. And if you simply can reprogram the human body to stop creating LDL cholesterol, you can then meaningfully reduce heart disease, which is the greatest killer of all kind in the world. So passion, expertise, and oftentimes having that Reese's Pieces moment, the sort of chocolate and peanut butter together, gene editing and heart disease, you come up with something big.
All of us in this room have recognized at some point that we're getting old. Have you? And how has that driven your approach to investing in this field?
It's incredible. Yeah, I had my first moment literally in life where I said I might be aging, and it happened about 12.2 months ago. And I was given a diagnosis of something called sciatica. Maybe a couple of heads are nodding. It's a horrible, terrible, unfair thing. And it really was the first sort of poke in the ribs saying, you're not going to be as sprightly and as pain-free and as flexible and mobile as maybe you thought you were. So I've been putting my whole self into sciatica. I spent another moment this week doing a deep dive on environmental science. Back to your point about it starts at birth. And I kind of came away from a conversation that I had with the dean of environmental science at Harvard University around microplastics and nanoplastics. And if people haven't studied what's going on. But I learned through a conversation earlier this week that even through placental transfer, newborns are born with micro and nanoplastics. We're finding this in cord blood. It's absurd. And the surface area of the problem and how you roll that back and how you make a change there is so significant. The dean at Harvard was explaining she's made a lot of changes in her life. She has a ceramic filter at home. She's drinking out of glass water bottles. She stopped using saran wrap to seal her leftovers. But she can't stop buying the strawberries at the farmer's market that are grown with such a technique that plastic is overlaid on top of the strawberry crops to create that hothouse effect. And so she's being exposed to plastics that way. It's an unstoppable problem. And it's in conflict with every major consumer company that's delivering everything to us in plastic because it beats up their business model. So I spent a bunch of time this week and then thinking about the extrapolation into aging. And so if there's some way to stop that train, we're all going to be better for it. We've read the data that plastics contribute to onset of dementia in a meaningful way. That's hugely disrupting cancer, inflammation, et cetera. All of those round trip into longevity and into health span and into aging. And so this is my thing that keeps me up at night this week. Would you talk a little bit about what I do from your perspective? Because I'm really curious.
So, Google is a fascinating company, and Google Ventures is for me, the dream job. You have the ultimate job. You get to identify people with great ideas. And the academic version of that are NIH study sections, where I would be invited to sit with a dozen other folks like me, and there would be 100 grants. Each one of them, people spent hundreds of hours working on promoting an idea that's supposed to be new, innovative, transformative, and people in the study section have to sit there and pick winners. And that's such a responsible job. And we're talking about $1 million grants. You have the capacity to take somebody with an idea and turn that into fact, into an enterprise, into a company that will create products that will change people's lives. I just envy that. That's such a remarkable opportunity to make a difference. We met when Ella came to look at USC. What did you guys do to get her interested in this field?
I think, like all great moments in my life, Ella experiences this. All of our children do, in fact. It's serendipity. Ella wasn't 17. Ella was more like 14, 14 and a half. Was on a walk in the neighborhood, and she noticed that a neighbor that we had never met, and we'd lived next to each other for 12 years, uh, had suffered an injury, fallen off her front step. This woman we only knew by lore. Her name was Irma Rosinski. She rolled her R's, so she was Irma Rosinski. And she lived alone. She'd been widowed over 20 years. We were told she was a Polish countess. We were always intrigued, but we'd never had that moment to meet each other. And our daughter was on a innocent neighborhood walk one day and noticed that Irma had fallen off her front step and literally couldn't get up. Ella rushed onto her property and introduced herself and helped her steady herself and stand up and become safe again. And they met each other properly, and Irma called the next day and invited Ella back to have another conversation. And literally, just that moment, that family that was destined to meet another family came together, and Ella was connected to Irma for years until she passed. And it gave her, most importantly, a feeling that her joy and her happiness and her satisfaction comes from the joy and peace and happiness of others. And that got her really connected into this community.
Collaborating between academia and industry is a theme that helps drive medical innovation forward. What is your view, especially in seeding new companies, on the role of this collaboration?
I'm really encouraged by it. I have a bias. I grew up with parents that were in academia, that were heavy in research. We had grad students and doctoral students around the house my entire life. I push a lot of my companies to reach into academia, particularly on the research side. Startup companies that are very thin on cash, that are fighting to see tomorrow, often don't have the resources or the time and patience to invest in long-term research, but through collaboration, through partnership, 100% they can. So I'm a huge proponent of that. Inverting it, I spent a fair amount of time looking into academia first and understanding what can we bring out? What can we set free? What can we fund? How can the IP be transferred respectfully? And how do we set that free, commercialize it, and bring it to a much larger audience in the world? Google, in fact, was born out of research at Stanford. So probably the best case that I refer to is where I really came from, which is the beginning of Google. But we're doing this now in healthcare. We're doing this now in neuroscience. We're doing this in many, many other areas. I'm excited about a day where the tension isn't singularly anchored to budgets and to people. And I'm really excited about the day, and the day is very, very close, where the maturation of these models and these data sets can do staggering, life-changing research very cost-effectively, very quickly, without feeling the same reliance that we feel today to have all those dollars and all those people to complete those research projects. And it is so humbling to be inside the walls of Google and to watch the invention that's happening on these large language models and these very sophisticated AI systems, and understanding the power and their potential for impact and change. And it is here now. So that gives me hope.